Welcome to Organizational Sherlocks, the podcast where business meets psychology and your organizational puzzles meet their match.
Join us for captivating stories and practical solutions to unravel your toughest challenges.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, your guides to a prescription for business success.
Well, let's dive in.
Well, I'm very excited for this episode because we've been talking about formalized programming for a little while now. And we have a guest who is actually writing a giant encyclopedia, basically, on formalized programming. So, Bill, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Bill Owenby. I'm a licensed professional counselor and supervisor here in the states of Arizona and Ohio. And as Morgan indicated, I am writing a brand new, never before done or seen encyclopedia that's housing all and as many of the trainings, certifications, and credentialings that you could ever think of in the mental health field. We are approaching, I believe it's about 590 chapters so far. So it's a very, very comprehensive book that I hope will be able to help everybody and anybody, regardless of what level of education, experience, or your career phase that you may be in.
Yeah, that is
amazing.
Impressive. Yeah, it's impressive. That is so cool and so needed too, because I know Morgan and I have talked about a few times. I came from a more clinical background, more mental health background, right? Had somebody told me IO was an option long ago, I might have made a different choice in my life. Now, do I regret it? No, because I absolutely love what I do now. And I think my journey got me to the right place. But if there were an encyclopedia back, a decade and a half ago, I might have looked at things a little different. So I think this is a lovely addition to the world. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm excited with it.
Yeah. Now I know it is still in process, so we have some time before it comes out. That's also kind of a little inkling for our listeners. If you might have a mental health topic, Bill definitely has some chapters that have been getting added over time. So feel free to reach out to us and we'll talk to Bill. And if he's open to it, we will connect you with him. So definitely keep that in mind if you want to get published.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, Elizabeth is the perfect yin to my yang because she has the clinical psychology background and I came in right in the IO side. But when I came in as the IO side, I have more of the business HR experience that I've immediately had brought in because I also was studying business at the time, but dropped that because it was too similar, business management and psychology. But I truly feel like Elizabeth and I have this perfect yin and yang relationship. So that is precisely why we started this podcast, was to learn from each other, teach others, bring guests on like you, Bill, who have a plethora of knowledge. If you guys look up Bill on LinkedIn, he has a billion titles in the commas next to his name.
It's gotta be a lot to write, Bill. Just like to write.
I'll joke with people on all the trainings I've done. I actually max out the character limitations on the LinkedIn profile. Yeah, so I never knew that there was a limitation, but
now we know, right?
Now, Bill, what was your purpose behind all of these different certifications and degrees that you've gotten?
I've been doing this for coming up on 15 years. Some of it just naturally happens. When you graduate, you run through the traditional requirements. You gotta get your license. To get your license, you gotta pass a national exam. You've already paid for the very expensive exam. Might as well pay a little bit more to get the credential that goes with it. Every time you do a training, there's always that little carrot that dangles right in front of you. It's like, for $100 more, you could get certified in it. So it just naturally progressed that way. When I started my doc program, there was a lot of things that were required of you. Again, I had to get more licenses. I had to obtain more certifications that just naturally occurred because of state licensure requirements, because of program requirements. and or it was too easy to get when you had done all the work, you paid so much money, you got right to the end. And I thought of it from just a business strategy perspective of who really doesn't like having a lot of those kind of credentials and certifications behind their name, whether you're the professional or you're the client, the potential client looking for somebody who's going to be able to help them. They're going to be able to see Bill has touched upon almost every single thing one could ever think of or hope of. So it just naturally occurred over all these years.
Yeah, it's almost like it brings a validity to your experience and your knowledge and your expertise. So funny enough, that reminds me, I'm in this mock lean certification right now. So basically they're trying it online for the first time. And so I'm in it. And so I'm going to get a lean certification, lean manufacturing, for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about. And I could go ahead and pay a little bit more and go and take the exam that associates with it, as well as do a report to then get, it's called like a belt, whatever color belt it is. I believe it would be the
Black belt?
brown belt, for based off this level of what I'm doing. And so you could go ahead and pay for that extra, or I could just go ahead and have the lean certification. So it's like, I'm already going to get one, but technically I could build on top of it. So that is so true, that it does naturally progress, and workplaces give you these types of experience too. It might happen naturally just in school and post school, but it also could happen because of opportunities you have at your workplace.
Agreed. Sometimes workplaces will, what's the saying? They'll put the cart before the horse.
Yes.
You will see this certain kind of population or client or age group, and you're thinking, ooh, I gotta get trained in that fast because I don't want to look foolish. And that's many therapists, many licensed professionals, that's one of their beginning concerns, is they don't want to look incompetent. They don't want that imposter syndrome to finally come out when they're working and then the world just goes on fire. So
Absolutely. That's
where a lot of these training programs, certification, credentialing options, that's where they kind of capitalize on it. They know you don't have the time to be doing this on your own.
Yeah.
But if you pay us the money, we'll make this as fast and as easy as possible.
When I think that comes, because you're talking about licensing and everything too, and every state is a little bit different. Some I think are a little bit more strict. I'm sure you've come across that, Bill. Some are more strict than others. I happen to live in a state that is, very, they want to make sure that the people here have what they need. So like credentialing, training, all of that is a very prominent, I will say, which I think is a good thing. It's all in the intention to protect the public, and I get that. But like you said, there are these continuing education units that every licensed person in the state of Minnesota, where I live, but across the nation and even into Canada and all over, right, that they have to do. And you kind of look at it, and it's like, well, if I'm going to spend 40 hours over the next, year or 2 years in these education programs or, continuing education, why not get the certification? I mean, you've put in the time, you might as well get the credit for that too. Do you know what I mean?
You're exactly right.
So now, sorry, go ahead, Val.
We're already doing so much that is required of us. It's a nice combination where you have to take in cost, interest, and requirement. And again, I always consider it like you're in a fast food line. You just want the burger, you just want the fries. I don't need the soda, but you'd save a little money if you just get the combo.
Yeah,
It's a great idea, and you still don't want to do it, but might as well do it. It's there. Yeah.
It's a great analogy.
You gotta supersize it.
I don't supersize anything when I go, but I do usually get the soda. I don't know that they do that anymore. Somebody asked me that the other day. I don't think so.
Nope.
No, I don't think so. I remember going through like training on that for some reason in a psychology course and talking about that, but not to get off subject. Now, we've talked about, that skill development that these just automatically bring. Do you feel that, there's hands-on experience still adds to the skill development, or do you feel that they can enter into the workplace or into that situation as an expert simply through that education program? Bill?
Can you say it one more time?
So we're talking about the skill development behind these certifications and educational programs. Do you think that they need an additional amount of hands-on experience in order to really solidify those skills, or do you feel that they can enter the workforce as experts post-certification?
So by all means, stop me and tell me we'll talk about that later. But one of my dissertation variables was on self-efficacy. Was not only a person's confidence in their abilities, but actually the hands-on dynamics. Does having the hands-on training and the hands-on experience, does it expedite their confidence, their competence? Long story short, yes, it does. Now, coming back to the training programs, that's one of the things that I've anecdotally noticed between good enough training programs and exceptional, competent, like everybody loved the training they went through, was that key factor. Was their hands-on experience in and during the training. There are other things that you know what I'm talking about. You can find mostly any training online, and you can just sit there and watch it for the next 6 to 8 hours and click, yeah, sure, I did it. You'll get your certificate of attendance, and you just submit your CEUs, and yeah, you're happy. But most people don't really do much with the information. They'll take some of those little nuggets here and there and stow it away for later on use. But it's the trainings that actually require you to have that hands-on experience, that very experiential. We're going to take what you learned, and now you're going to learn how to do it. You're going to have simulations to doing it. And that's where I see a lot of people are much more happier, and they feel much more confident and competent going back into the workforce, whether it's just going back to work Monday morning or starting that new job or starting a different job. They feel so much better. They look so much better knowing that they, in a way, got their hands dirty during the training, and they feel good enough to be able to do it when and if the time comes.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of solidify, true formalized programming to an extent, I would say, has that hands-on experience. Elizabeth and I have talked about, the quote internships or the practicums that people have to do in their doctoral program. That's hands-on experience, but it's part of the formalized program. Now, I know there's formalized programs that, yes, you can sit through for 8 hours and then click, yes, I watched this. And it's not going to be as effective as you'd want it to be in that scenario. And so I know when I develop trainings, they're not necessarily formalized trainings, but they're trainings for my team or teams I've worked with. And I always have some sort of engagement factor where they have to work through problems and they have to apply it. Because without it, people don't truly learn. You don't see that buy-in. You don't see that true connection of, this deeper thought. It really, sunk in. Right? It didn't really sink in without that experience.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, Bill, and I'm sure you have, but are you familiar with the 70-20-10 model? You heard of that? It's something I use in my practice. And I think, like it speaks.
Remind me of it.
No, you're good. No, and I know I put you on the spot there. I mean, it's something I use in my practice. I'm not saying it's like the best ever, but I do think it speaks to this in some ways. That's, we often, I think, look at, like an online course, like, I'm not going to name drop different whatever platforms, but like different courses, like, oh, I'm going to learn everything I need to know about this topic because I took this 3-hour class. But really, like, adult learning, that hands-on experience, the practical experience really matters. And so the 70-20-10 model is, if you really break it down, like 70% comes from that hands-on practical experience, 20% from feedback and like mentoring and that kind of stuff, and then 10% from that more educational kind of component. But all of them are needed, right? So you need all of those pieces, but it's in that 10%, I go to this certification or I go to this training course. How can I take that knowledge that I've gained and then apply it and then get feedback on the application of it, which I think is something that I imagine, like you as a supervisor too, that's a core probably component of what you're doing, is helping people understand how the application can be, you know, shifted and tailored and moved. I don't know if that's the right word, to have the most effectiveness, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a tangent for me. See, I go on tangents a lot, Bill. Now you know that.
That's all of us. Yeah. No, you're right. And I think of it from that supervisory perspective. There's that catch-22 where our supervisees, our trainees, they need a place where they can cultivate these kinds of skills, but they're also operating under the assumption that you and I, we don't have these skills yet. We're required to supervise them. So it puts us in a real kind of clinical dilemma of we need to help folks develop these skills that we don't really have professionally ourselves.
Right.
And so that's again where that hands-on experience in the training, due to the training, because of the training, that's where we can capitalize, where in a way it puts the accountability and responsibility on the student, on the supervisee. You got the hands-on experience. Now you got to almost train me. You got to teach me. One, you'll understand it much better. Two, I'll be able to follow you very closely. That's kind of one of the hidden secrets becoming a supervisor is we can pick up on stuff real fast and we know exactly where they're going to go. Because eventually, a lot of the modalities, I mean, they're all derived from similar and same modalities. So if you hear one, chances are you already know what it's related to.
Right. Well, and I will say too, I think like, you know, again, coming from that background, and then I teach in a counseling psychology program, even though my focus is more on like the IO and business side of things, which is really an interesting way to see a program like that. But there are times where people will say things and I'm like, yep, I remember hearing about that at one time. And I don't know, like just start talking. And then as they talk, it's like, oh yeah. I know what IPT is. That's, you know, interpersonal therapy or whatever. Like, but at the moment I couldn't come up with, you know, because it's not I don't live it and breathe it every day. Right. And I think that's kind of, you know, part of, like you said, being a skilled supervisor is having some amount of knowledge, but like it may not be in the forefront of your mind all the time.
Yeah. Well, I also know in the workplace as a supervisor, you know a majority of how to do like the jobs of people that are underneath you, or sometimes, you know, parts of it. I can tell you, I am not an expert in half my team's knowledge base. I could definitely go in and train on it and become an expert, but I know what they mean when they're talking about logistics versus bookkeeping versus purchasing. I know the general process there. So just like in an academic program, that's how it works in the real world in a business environment, is the supervisor doesn't know the day-to-day. They call that the laissez-faire style to an extent. But there's asymmetric information constantly from a supervisor or a teacher to their students or their supervisees. And so I don't think it's odd. It's more so the capability of a supervisor to become an expert if they need to more quickly to ensure they can help their supervisee.
Yeah. I like that. Well, I'm kind of curious if it's okay, Bill, that I again kind of put you on the spot.
This is your favorite thing to do, Bill.
It is. I know. I have these little quirks about me. One of them is that I like to put people on the spot. It's just a thing. I don't know. But I want to go back just really quickly to the encyclopedia that you are pulling together, because I think that's really interesting. And I'm just curious, what are your kind of your hopes and dreams for it? You know, once it's out there in the world, like what are you hoping the impact will be of it being out there for people to consume?
it's hard to narrow down to one. It's very multifaceted. So you open the door to me going on a bunch of tangents. So here it goes.
Hey, we welcome it.
The first thing, so being a supervisor for 12, 13 years, I've seen my fair share of extremely solid people coming through the doors underneath my wings. I've seen some very concerning people coming through the doors, not underneath my wings. And then I've seen very, very, very questionable, like, yeah, gatekeeping should have happened well before you got to me. So thank you, faculty,
Yes.
for this opportunity. And one thing I notice is that they all share the same thing. That's part of that developmental phase that they're in when they just graduate, they just got their license. Ooh, I don't know what to do with it. I need to feel competent. I need to feel confident. I don't have the skills. My master's program, my doc program, they didn't teach me these skills. I mean, they did, but it's a lot of accreditation standard requirements. They're actually not allowed to what's the word? They're not allowed to adopt one particular training modality. That's why they all focus on theories and just learning those micro skills. Who did the micro skills? I can see the book cover, I just can't picture it. But it's the active listening, the empathy, the paraphrasing. That's not just one modality, that's all the modalities for the most part. So when people get into agency work or private practice and all of a sudden they're like, oh, you need to do this trauma-informed CBT approach. I didn't know that was a thing. Oh, you're going to run our DBT group. What's DBT? And so I noticed a lot of these, not only beginning professionals, but a lot of professionals, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what's out there. When I pitched the number earlier this morning, and some of y'all's eyes lit up where it was like, how many modalities are out there? Yeah, a little over 580. And those are just the legit ones that, like, they're certified, they're legit, they've been evidence-based, they've been studied. They don't look like a really bad website. So there are a lot out there. And with that said, there are a lot of modalities. There's a lot of cool, really cool stuff out there that people don't know about. Don't worry about him. This is cat number 2. When he hears me in meetings, he has to join and just kind of, he'll lay down in a second. And
We welcome visitors. That's okay.
Yeah, we love them. We've had kids join in the past too.
Yeah. My kids join sometimes too, Bill. That's all right.
So that was one of the number one things I noticed amongst all of them was, I want more training in something. I don't know what I want, and I don't know how to get it.
Right.
That's legit. If I asked any of you, if Morgan asked me, oh, well, where's that bachelor's in IO program? What? I didn't know there was. I thought IO was just doc programs. When I was going to school, there was 2 programs, 2 IO PhD programs.
Right. And
the faculty nicely said, you're not going to get into either one because they're extremely hard to get into. Now, all of a sudden, I come across Morgan, and she has opened up my eyes of non-doctoral related programs and certifications. And I wish I knew that. I think Dr. Fleming, you said that too. I wish I knew that 10 years ago, because IO is interesting. I love it. My wife was interested in it. Like, it's a really cool, fascinating modality, but had to go a different route because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
That's one of the tangents. So a lot of people, they need the training. They don't know where to look, and they don't know really what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So
They really don't.
I wanted to create this encyclopedia where it was not only ideally from the creators, the founders, the presidents of these associations, or people just like Morgan, who she lives and breathes masters in IO psychology, business strategies. She knows it. She does it every day. That's also the kind of person we want writing these chapters. And then there are some chapters that's a golden hair and a yellow bale of hay. You're just not going to be able to find the founders for sometimes obvious reasons, or they just don't want to do it.
Right.
I get it. It's one more thing on your plate. So I'm finding more people who are interested, like you were saying earlier. What is neurodivergent affirming therapy? Everyone knows what that means, but no one's ever heard of it until right now.
Right.
Like, that's a really cool thing. I did not know that existed. I want to learn more about it. Hence why the chapters are comprehensive and they're very short. Because again, almost 590 chapters. No one's going to want to read back to back. I love it if you do, but sometimes you just want to scroll the table of contents and be like, oh, what is that?
Yeah. That fits in well with our podcast because we're all about curiosity, right? I mean, that's what you're talking about, is just being curious about what's out there. And I think too, you know, for you kind of in that mental health space and for the other folks that are, I mean, imagine you said there's over, was it 580? Right. Like imagine trying to figure out what you want to be trained in, but then also how does that translate out to the people you're working with? How do you find the best modality or the best person or, you know, whatever to work with them? Because that's a lot of things to be aware of. So having that like kind of nifty handbook of, well, this is what I'm dealing with, or this is what my client is dealing with. How can I help them? I think can be really beneficial. And even in like the business setting, you know, it's not like we in HR or anything like that are saying, well, you need to go see a DBT therapist. Like that's not what we're doing. But if we have something like that at our fingertips, we can say, hey, you know, I read this chapter and it made me think a little bit about what you told me. Maybe this is something to check out, right? And I think there's application in many areas. And again, I appreciate that you're pulling this all together because I know that's a huge, huge undertaking. Big.
You asked a question, but it wasn't really a question, so I'm going to answer it.
Did I? I don't know.
So
he's putting you on the spot.
Yeah, that's fine.
When a lot of people think, well, like maybe they're listening here and they're like, oh man, I don't want to go through 590 chapters. How do I pick one? How do I pick 5? What's neat about this encyclopedia is in the very beginning, we have not only, I think it's 3 different books that help you navigate that.
That's perfect.
One of them's kind of thick, so you got to really be dedicated, but it's very comprehensive. It not only talks about what modalities are out there, like let's say theoretical modalities, so it kind of broadens it up, it groups them up, but it talks about how to apply it, when to apply it, who's a good client, who's not a good client right now, what makes a good CBT therapist, what makes a good DBT therapist.
Right.
Then there's another book that goes into it. It's much briefer, shorter, and it talks about the same thing, but in a different way. And if you have what I call a book death pile, where all these books sound great, yet you keep adding it on to I'll get to it eventually. We have a website. Phenomenal guy. His name's Ed Nierkrug. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. He's done a few encyclopedias for Sage in the past. He has not only created a website, but he's trying to get it validated, where you answer maybe like 60 questions, and it will tell you what modalities you most align with, you most agree with, based on your perceptions and your approaches to human beings, human behavior, problems, disorders. So then at least it can narrow it down to, well, you should check out these listed in order for you.
Right.
That's actually amazing, because I know certain people, they will have that will and way to do all the research, but other people, they either don't have the will and the way, or they don't have the time.
Yeah.
That is a constriction for some people. But like you're talking about it in real time with this encyclopedias, there is so much out there. And so this is supposed to get you a deeper knowledge of what it looks like to go for this certification, what it looks like to go for this career. Maybe you go for this certification instead of this new master's or second master's degree, because that will expand the knowledge in the way you need it to as well. I feel like it's going to have those discrepancies where it really helps you determine where you should put your money to get further education that builds upon your career. It also will show you what's right for you, and also what you need to show, or what you need to have for the people hiring you too, or for the clients you bring on, if you start your own practice in a way. And I think that is so important, because I know when, just like Elizabeth said, she's like, I wish I had known about IO years ago. Well, I was doing research upon research upon research. I just wouldn't stop looking at psychology and business. I just did research constantly. If I'm sitting, this was my teenage years, probably I was sitting and researching, at work, because teenage job, sometimes you just sit there for a while, right? So I was researching on my phone, what could I do? What could I do with this? And I'm divulging as much information as I can. And so I knew how to gather that information, and that really led me in the IO way. I was able to find it, but it took a while. I mean, I did research for 2 years before I found IO. 2 years.
Yeah.
So imagine the people that didn't spend that much time researching every weekend what they could do while they were in college or while they were in high school. And sometimes there's late bloomers too. This is a huge, it's an amazing guide for them that is thorough, complete. I know I wrote a chapter and I'm writing another one now. So it talks about the educational requirements. It talks about the monetary requirements. It talks about, I know on mine, I talk about job titles and whatnot in it, because IO is a very comprehensive topic itself. I feel like there could be a whole book on a whole encyclopedia on IO alone, and the different titles you could gather from it. But I'm very excited to see this come out, and to see people using it and really acting on their careers thanks to it.
There's an unfortunate phenomenon that happens. Dr. Fleming, you might have heard this or seen it in your time in your clinical psych program, where we are taught as supervisors to help our supervisees find their voice, find their modality. But what in the reality is, the supervisee simply becomes the supervisor's modality. I'm going to teach you to become what I am, because it's much easier and less time consuming to figure out what you want to do, or where you want to go. So again, I wanted to give not only that voice, but that choice to people, and be like, hold on. And I go into it in my intro chapters, where there's a lot of really neat, interesting research by Scott Miller, Duncan, and Wampold, where there's not a lot of difference between modalities as far as efficacy.
Right.
So more or less, find something you like, find something that interests you, find something that you enjoy doing, because you're gonna be doing it much more or much longer than you think you will. So you might as well like it.
It's funny. I actually have a student who approached me recently about a dissertation topic, almost exactly in that space, about kind of the emotional experience of a supervisee when their hopeful modality does not match that of their supervisors. And I think it's just a fascinating part, because I think, again, that can translate into business too. If your style is not my style, but you're supposed to be teaching me how to be a leader, or teaching me how to do the work, how does that all come to bear,
think of your business personality, your disc personality there. You know, a person's D personality is not going to necessarily work with an S personality well, but you need to be able to change it as the D supervisor for the I supervisee, or even for customers versus sales reps. We actually went through a whole disc training with our sales team recently on that, for that exact purpose, because personalities work together differently. I also feel like this conversation really goes into that mentorship type of role. We talked about being mentors and mentees. And I know we talked about, you know, we have an IO behind the scenes who I'm like, you could be a lot like me. And I say that, but I hope Darian agrees that we really went through, you know, what do you want to do? What are these subjects really interests you? And that way we focus on that first. I always try to apply my projects with the mentees to their interests, even if it's not mine, but it's something I know I can work on because I'm a little more generalized. But definitely, I think that's a really great point, Bill, is that sometimes, you know, you might not have the exact mentor for you. And so something like this encyclopedia could help you determine what you want to do, and even help the mentor know, hey, you might not be this modality, you might be this one instead, even though I'm the other one.
Yeah. I actually teach a class in the program that I'm in. It's called Contemporary Practice, and it's a class where we simply talk about. I mean, it's I would say it's kind of like half class and half support group, because they're all also like getting ready to go on internship, and that's a huge scary thing because a lot of them move out of the state, and like, you know, there's a lot going on. But I teach a class called Contemporary Practice, which is a lot of this, right? Like, how do you choose your modality? It's also about how do you want yourself to be represented as a future, you know, psychologist in this case, and what does brand mean to you? And if you want to go into private practice, what is that going to look like versus if you want to work in a hospital? And like, just getting into the realistic components of, we have just dumped 5 years of education on you, right? Like, you have all of this knowledge swirling around in your brain, and now what happens next, right? Like, what does that look like? And I think it's, for me, like the program I teach, and I think that's a pretty cool thing. I think most programs should, or all programs should have something like that. But it's one of my favorite classes to teach, because I get to talk about all of these topics with them. And it's not just about how you work with your clients, but how do you care for yourselves, and how do you make a business and a name for yourself in a way that is professional and helpful, and you know, all of those things. So I love that. And actually, Bill, I'm going to hit you up if you're okay with that, because I think my class would love to talk with you about some stuff. Okay. Sorry, say that again, Bill.
I was hoping you'd ask. I was like, yes. Oh, that sounds like fun.
Oh, it's a fun class. I love it. The first half is they're a little bit daunting, because they're waiting to be matched with their internship. And so there's a lot of like professional anxiety at that moment. But after that, it gets a little bit better. So can I do something really weird though? Because I'm feeling a little bit silly, because it's cold here in Minnesota today. And that's a new experience for me this week, because it was 80 degrees like 2 days ago. Okay, you said something, Morgan, it made me think about it. You said something about high school jobs, like how when you were in high school, you were researching different things. I'm curious, what for all of you, like, what was your favorite high school job? Oof. Or maybe not favorite. What job did you have where you think like, man, when I look back, that was really impactful in my life? This is me putting you on the spot, Andy.
I don't know about an impactful job. I know about a fun job I had.
Okay, we'll do fun then.
I mean, I guess I started to train people during that job and kind of take on supervisor responsibilities, even though I wasn't the supervisor. So it kind of led me into what I do anyway now, is kind of training supervisors, right? But funny enough, I was a guide at a treetop course. So, you know, like when they have zip lines and obstacle courses through the trees, I did that back in the day. And honestly, it was so fun. I'm very athletic, so I like doing it. But you're teaching people to go through the course. You're like opening up the course, or making sure all the safety requirements are there. And our supervisor, I would open the entire course for her, even though she was technically supposed to be the one doing half of it, and then I would do half of it. I remember doing that, and it was so fun. But it allowed me to sit in the trees a lot, read, and do research.
That sounds awesome. I love that. How about you, Bill? I'm curious. I will share, I promise, but
I was racing bikes in high school and college. And
okay.
so what you naturally do, because bike parts can be very expensive, you work in a bike shop. So I was a bike mechanic for years and absolutely loved it. I think I was, what's the saying? Sitting high on the horse at $7 an hour. I
Yep.
thought, like, life can't get any better than this. I get 40% off of bike stuff. I loved it. You hung out with bikers, your friends would come by. That was it. I absolutely loved it. But there was also a lot of downtime. So you would learn how to do other stuff. You would learn how to advance, how to become a better mechanic, a better biker. You would just learn all those little skills that really could only be given to you in the bike shop. There was no read. You could read it. You could read how to do certain things, but eventually you get to a point where you need to jump in the pool and swim. Like, you can't just read the theory of hydrodynamics and think you'll swim the lap. No, you got to get in.
Absolutely.
So yeah, like I loved it. I loved being just one of those bum high schoolers working in a bike shop.
I think that sounds awesome.
Before you jump in, Elizabeth, I will have a little bit of a like challenge for something Bill said. So I'm currently reading Psycho-Cybernetics, and it discusses when you role play practice in your head, you can become a better musician, a better mechanic, a better athlete, or maintain your capabilities despite an absence from the task at hand. So funny enough, you might actually be able to become a better mechanic by studying and role playing in your head, as though you're doing it, but you're doing it in your head.
Visualizing it. I like it.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
That's cool. I like that. Mine's not as exciting as that. I'm going to be honest with you, but I worked at Subway. I was a sandwich artist, you guys. I grew up in like small town, rural Minnesota. There was not a whole lot, which actually brings me like back to a point I was going to really quickly make, and then I'll go back to my story earlier, is that I think the way that people research now and the ability to research is very different. Like when I grew up and was looking at where I wanted to go to college, I did not have Wi-Fi that was constantly enabled. Like I was waiting for the little ding, 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 like thing to like connect me to the internet. And like I didn't have a cell phone, right? So I think it's funny because things are so different, and that's something I have to get used to. But anyway, go off track. I just had to make that comment. But I was a sandwich artist, and I find it fascinating that a big company like Subway would trust a 16-year-old to close a restaurant completely and make sure that like safety is all good. But it was a cool way to learn at the age of 16 about being accountable, being responsible, about customer service. I think everyone should have a customer service job because, man, that is tough at times, but it prepares you for life. So it was a pretty impactful experience, but I will be honest, there's very few choices where I grew up on like where I could work. So, and I got free sandwiches for every 4 hours I worked. So
yeah, I refused to work at like I was a waitress at one point in time, but I definitely refused. I tried to like do the fun jobs of the guiding, but definitely was the big customer service aspect to that. And, they trusted us to maintain the course. Like we had to maintain the course. Like I would loosen, like you'd have to loosen certain things, so the trees could grow. And we would do that every year, once a year. And so
quite literally, they were trusting that you wouldn't let people fall. I was
I would take people off the course. I would screw people off the course and lower them down.
I was just being trusted that I
not to drop the rope, basically.
Yeah, I was just being trusted I didn't give people bad turkey. Like, I mean, so there's that.
Yeah, people's lives are in my hand. I was dropping some people 150 feet off the course by a rope.
Oh goodness. Well, thank you guys for doing that with me. I appreciate it. I just think it's so interesting because I don't think we look back to those times in our life enough and say like, well, what did we learn from that? And
right back to
like, what experiences have I had that have brought me to where I am today? I think that's a really important part of even where we go in our future, So thank you for working through that random thought of mine. So
It's okay. You put us on the spot. Third time's the charm, right? Third time this episode. Well, that I feel like we've had such a great comprehensive discussion here with you, Bill. It was really great having you on. Do you have anything to add regarding, your experience within formalized programming versus, your encyclopedia or anything else? Any other insights?
So in preparation for this book, I'm currently writing 2 journal articles talking about, like, in a way, does training make a professional better? And so I look at that from like kind of a critical review.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm coming off of Disneyland for majority of a week, graduating, and then sick while graduating. So that Halloween was last night. So I can't remember the second journal article right now, the title of it. But basically it's looking at the same thing. And and so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get that published before this book comes out. So hopefully people can read it and be like, ooh, I like his take on it. I've seen that name before. And then this book comes out where, because a lot of people will say, well, training doesn't really make a person better. There's a little bit of truth to that, but I don't know if I want to trust anybody, no matter how good of a sales person they are, if they haven't had training in something.
Yeah.
So
Bill, you're getting right into a book I'm writing right now, actually.
Okay.
So we'll have to talk about that off the video, and then I can give you some more insight.
One thing kind of to leave you with here in my introductory chapters, I love quotes. I love putting things in perspective based off of a quote. And one of the things that I'm trying to capitalize with this book is you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your level of training.
Mm-hmm.
And that hits so hard, regardless if whatever you're doing, you might have a grasp on it until you have that first crisis counseling session.
Mm-hmm.
You have that first person when you didn't think, oh, I don't need to go to the crisis intervention training. I don't need to do the suicidal prevent. And then you're sitting in that room with that person and you're screaming at yourself. You're using profane language.
Right.
Like, oh no, I should have went.
Right.
You just fell to your level of training. You got as far as you could until you couldn't. So that's the main essence of this book is there's more out there than beyond your bachelor's program, your master's program, your doc program. Yeah. I'm sure there are things that you can attest to from your doc program where you're like, they didn't really do a good job on this aspect or this part that you should have known. Yeah. This is nothing new. You should have at least given me a heads up on something.
Well, and I think for a lot of programs, master's, doc, all of them, like there's electives, right? And you can't take every single, I mean, you could take every single elective, but you'd be really, 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 really in debt.
But for my master's in legal studies, I can't take more electives. I already asked.
Yeah. But then there are gaps, right, Bill? There are gaps. And what I like about the quote you just used is that it puts the ownership of training onto the person. Like you have to be the person who's curious. You have to be the person who wants more, who wants to be a continuous learner. And there's a part of that, let's be honest, that ego has to be put aside. There's not one person in this world that knows everything, right? So how can you move through that and take advantage of what's available to you, So
and
I appreciate that.
You look at my name, you look at my credentials. I've done a lot and I still don't know anything.
Right.
Like that's the point of the doc program, is to make you so humbled that there's so much more out there than you ever imagined.
Mm-hmm.
So like not only doing this book and reading these chapters, like I've read every chapter. It's exhausting. And the more I read, the less I know.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
really going back to the drawing board of, I don't think how did I get here? Like,
Mhm.
like the imposter syndrome, it's real. It's apparent. Like I feel it almost every time I read a chapter where I'm like, how did I not know this?
Right.
How is this not trained? How is this not common sense? So it's very humbling, as you said, put the ego aside. You're not only thinking about yourself, like, yeah, do things that you're interested in, but also think about that client. Who do you want to work with? Who wants to work with you? And how can you best minimize that gap?
Yeah. One of my favorite questions before we wrap up that I ask myself, I've been asked both in the clinical world, but also in the business world, especially when networking and that kind of stuff, is who is your ideal client? And I think that's a good question for all of our listeners to keep in mind. Your client may be, if you're in the mental health world, it may be a client in a therapy session or whatever. If you're in the business world, it may be, who's your ideal client that you're selling to, or that you're marketing to. In HR, who's your ideal group of people you want to work with. If you're in consulting, like who do I want to work with on what topics? Do I want to be in leadership? Do I want to do organizational development or change management? Like what does that all look like? And so I think just keeping that in the back of your mind is who is your ideal client can help maybe guide you a little bit too of, what chapters should I look at first? So.
Well, thank you again, Bill. I think we have kind of dribbled down to the fact that never stop learning is something we'll always say. I always say be a sponge of knowledge. So with that,
this concludes another intriguing episode of Organizational Sherlocks. I'm Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, reminding you that the journey to success is an ongoing investigation.
As we've talked about throughout this entire episode, make sure to stay curious, stay strategic, and then keep utilizing insights to decode your business mysteries.
In this case, your educational mysteries.
That's
so
right.
Join us every Tuesday for your next Whodunit. This is Organizational Sherlocks closing today's case.
See you all next time.